Hey, this is Lady C coming at you with another video. I was talking to my husband this morning when we were out on our walk, and I was saying, you know what? It's so interesting how when we left the religion, how we had family members that were asking us, so what are you doing now that you left the Jehovah's Witnesses? And I started saying, well, I enrolled in college and I'm, trying to, get my degree, and I'm trying to, change jobs and meet new friends and, just get a new life and all that kind of stuff going on. And my husband said, they're not asking you that question, what you doing, going to school and all that. They want to know what church you're going to now. And I was like saying, that's what a lot of people don't understand. A lot of people, they don't understand that Jehovah's Witnesses were not allowed to do those things that I was sharing with his family. Then it was one of his aunts that was asking me that question. And I said, they don't understand that we have been held back for so long. And they don't understand that we're playing catch up now, that we're leaving this religion. And so, I don't think people realize just how sheltered or how they convinced us to not pursue education, pursue better careers and stuff like that. So when you leave the religion, you're like, I'm trying to get myself together now. When you think about, how you're raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses and you just believe it, I was a little kid, this is all I knew, and you're looking at all the people around you making choices. And I think the biggest thing I feel is how they indoctrinate us as Jehovah's Witnesses. Because the other day, I was just kind of thinking back over my life, and I'm kind of saying to myself, at what point would I have been able to do any critical thinking about what I had been taught and, how I had been taught to view education? And I don't see where any cracks were forming at all. I mean, most kids hate going to school. I felt like sometimes you were being teased because of your religion, and I feel like, you just were saying, I can't wait to get out of here, right? Also, I remember when I was being teased by this one girl, in the back of my mind, I was saying, that's okay, because you're going to be destroyed at Armageddon anyway, so you ain't going to matter. What you're saying to me right now is really not going to matter, So, you're going through so much. You're young. You don't understand why you don't celebrate Christmas. You don't understand why you don't do birthdays. You're just not understanding it. All you know is that you're being told that we don't do these things, and you're trying to fit in. You want to fit in. And then with this education thing, you're going to school, you're being told, like, at least when I was coming along, you might not ever graduate from high school, And so I'm thinking to myself, at the time, I was in junior high. And to be very honest with you, I didn't even think I was going to enter high school. I didn't even think I would get to the 9th grade, because this is just how they were pushing the end of the world so tough during the time that I was coming along. So do you actually think that school is going to be something on the top of your list of things to do as a youngster who's tired of being, bullied at school because of their religion? And now the religion is giving you this out that's going to say, soon this is going to be over and you're not going to be dealing with these people, giving you a hard time. You're not going to be graduating from high school. I didn't think I was even going to start high school, at the time. That's just the way I felt. So when you start thinking about how as time goes on, and because of the way they made you feel about school, now I finally go to high school. Now I'm taking a science class. Now they're talking about the Big Bang Theory. Get where I'm going with that? Evolution. So at this point, you're like, there's no such thing. Because you're being taught creation, and in this science class, I'm being taught that we evolved. And so in the back of my mind, I don't shut down, because I'm thinking to myself, why is the school making me take this science class because it was a requirement to graduate. I had such a bad attitude about science that I was like, I'm not paying attention. I don't care. And guess what happened? That semester ended and I did not pass that class. It was all about my attitude, but where did the attitude come from? Where did this attitude of science, the Big Bang Theory, all that stuff just shut me right down? You know, I knew some things in science and I tried to learn what I could learn, but it wasn't enough to pass that class. Next semester comes along. Guess where I'm at? I'm back in science. All my other, classmates, they done moved on to something else. And I'm over here stuck back in science again, with the same old attitude. Like, same teacher. And he's probably thinking, what is up with this kid, But ain't nobody saying nothing. I don't recall letters going home to my parents talking about help this child out. I don't remember anything like that going on, So second semester, science, same class, same teacher. But this time, I managed to get through with a D. Okay, so I get through the class, but I'm getting a D. So still not performing, still got this bad attitude about education. I don't know how well I would have done in science had I not had this Jehovah's Witness background. I just don't know. What would have happened to me if I would not have been a Jehovah's Witness. I don't know if I would have been still struggling with science or what. And I remember the kids in my class, they had these science projects, and I really wish I could go back to my life and do science all over again, because I think I would have had a lot of fun with it, with the mind that I have now. You know what I mean? So I'm just saying, you just never think about it. But I think it's just the way we're indoctrinated to the point that just makes you have a bad attitude about education. And this, my friends, this is in my high school years. This is not secondary education. This is just the education I need to get a high school diploma. I'm having this bad attitude about these classes all because I've been indoctrinated from childhood about how bad this world is and about how, terrible education is. You might not graduate and this and that and the other, and the end of the world is coming. So I'm thinking, I had already checked out. I had done checked out and not even thinking about what I'm going to do after I graduate, because remember, I'm not supposed to graduate. Now, let's fast forward some years. I'm struggling with math and science and English, all of that, right? I'm just barely getting through. I'm an average student, and not really getting through the curriculum like everybody else. And I look back at some of the people in my class, and I'm like, wow, their life was so much different than mine. I wonder what it was like at their house. What was their parents saying to them? What kind of conversations were they having when it came to education? Because I'm telling you right now, those conversations, they were not happening in my house. Nobody was looking at my report card and saying, we need to help this child. Nobody was doing that. And so, I finally made it through high school and everything. And I remember driving down Gratiot Avenue, sitting at the light at 23 Mile in Gratiot. That's right, I'm from Michigan. For those of you who know where that is, hello. Anyway, and I remember, and I'm telling you right now, I remember that. And in the back of my head, I was saying, girl, what are you going to do? And the first thing in my mind popped up, I said, well, you can't go to college. That's not an option. I remember that like it was yesterday. And, I had no reason. The only reason why I was saying that I could not go to college is because back when I was coming along, you would be going off to a campus, okay? That would be like a 4-year degree. Because when I was coming along, nobody talked about getting an associate's degree. Sorry, that just was not something I thought about. But there was a community college in my area. But I never, ever thought about taking any classes at the community college level. So what did I do? The next best thing. I was already taking typing and shorthand in high school, and I was excelling at that. I was really good at organizing, writing business letters, doing my little shorthand, typing and all that kind of stuff, and filing, all that kind of stuff. That seemed to be something I was good at. Because, it had nothing to do with science and algebra. So all this other stuff, I seem to excel in business more than anything else. And so we found a school in the area where I could drive back and forth to school. And I was able to go to a business school. And my plan was supposed to be 9 months. But me and my mother, we put our heads together, and I was trying to save a few dollars because I was like, well, you know what, Mom? I said, I already know how to type and do shorthand. I'm sure I don't have to do the whole 9 months. So we put our heads together. We went down to talk to the admissions of this business school, and we were able to shorten my schooling by 3 months. So I was able to take the same training and everything in a 6-month course. And when you graduated from that particular school, they found you your first job. And so that's what happened to me. And so I ended up being a secretary. Now, that's what we all did back in the day. I mean, a lot of women, you either did hairdressing, nursing, or secretarial. And looking back, I was good at what I did, working as a secretary. And then I ended up being an executive assistant. And then I went on to start my own business. And then I got a job working as a IT instructor. So I think I could have did a lot better if I had that education, though. I mean, I made decent money coming along, but I could have did much better with that degree. So, I mean, I'm just saying, but like I said earlier, I look back and I think, where was that crack in the foundation? Where could I have seen a crack coming? There was nothing there. I mean, the indoctrination of Jehovah's Witnesses was just so tight that you look over here and you had somebody reinforcing the rules over here. You look over there, the rules were being reinforced. And so everywhere you looked, somebody was reinforcing, do it the Watchtower way. I will say this, no matter how much latitude you had in terms of who you associated with, your friends, the people at work, at school, and all that kind of stuff, nobody was infiltrating your mind when it came to your education and different types of choices. So you might have gone out to dinner with somebody that wasn't one of Jehovah's Witnesses, but if they would have told you that it's okay to celebrate your birthday or celebrate a holiday or break ranks and go to college, that would have never gotten through your head. There were just things that you just did not compromise in this religion. At least that's how I was. And I really, really wish that my parents would have been those parents that would have been like, my child is going to college. But then they were the same people that sat there and saw me getting a C and a D and didn't ask questions about what could I do better. So I didn't have much to work with at all, So it's kind of frustrating and stressful. But, looking back, all I can do is just be grateful for the little education that I did get going along. But then when my husband and I left this religion, we knew the first thing we needed to do was to enroll in college, so I did. It took me 10 years to earn a bachelor's degree. And I learned quite a bit. I enjoyed my studies. I got through that algebra, and I did graduate at the top of my class. But, I mean, there's so many different layers to this, and everyone is coming from a different area, of life. I'm not that one that got a scholarship, but it makes me wonder if I could have gotten one if I would have had a better attitude about education, because my whole attitude about education was all drilled in my head from the time that I was a little kid and growing up in this religion. And then also, I later discovered that I really did need that tutor. No one was paying attention. I was that kid that just needed a little bit more instruction. And, given my last name, I was always sitting at the back of the room, because when I was coming along, they always seated you according to your last name. So I'm that kid sitting in the back room, because of my name, and then later discovered I needed eyeglasses. And so that could have been some of the issues too. But later on, realizing all it was is I needed an extra push or an extra explanation. And when I was working with my professor in biology, because I got an A in biology, and my professor was so nice. He was like, yes. He said, I'm so glad you're asking questions. I'm so glad you're calling me after hours to get extra help. That's all I needed. I needed one-on-one. So if the teacher was sitting there talking about, or explaining a concept, then after the class, I was like, can you help me understand this concept a little bit better? And once I got that, I was cooking with gas. I was doing better than half the people in my class because I was asking questions. And this one girl in my class, she was getting kind of frustrated because she was like, every time I turn around, you got something to say. And the teacher said, He said, a lot of people in the class they're too afraid to ask the questions that I was asking. And a lot of people were sitting there not getting the assignment because they were too afraid to show up and be that person that did not know. But I was like, you know what? So I told one day I said, listen, I said, I am paying for this class. And I said, and they're going to teach me something up in here. Because I had struggled through school, when I was a kid. I did that already. I got the bad grades. But now I'm paying for this. And I am not going to sit here and act like I know how to do this work. I was like, nope, we're not doing that. So those are some things that I had changed and had to change about myself. So for those of you out there who are struggling, you don't think that you can do the schoolwork, I'm going to recommend you to go to ChatGPT. And to learn more about ChatGPT, click the link above and I'll give you personal training. And I told ChatGPT this a long time ago when I first learned about this AI system. I said, where were you when I was coming along in school? I said, because if I had you back then, I would not have struggled so bad. I would have been able to get my school assignments done. And that computer would have been able to help me. So for those of you who may be struggling a little bit, you need somebody to help you connect those dots, I would highly recommend it. ChatGPT has been my saving grace out here in this world. Okay? So anyway, I just want to share my little education background and my story with you because it might help somebody. It may help you to really and truly understand who you are and try to understand what's going on in your personal life. This has been Lady C. I thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next one.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Hidden Struggles with your host, Lady C. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to stay connected with us. For more content, insights, and support, visit us online at hiddenstruggles.com. We'll catch you next time on Hidden Struggles. Until then, keep pushing forward.